So, Joe Biden is toppling the leftist illusion faster than he can stumble up the stairs of the Air Force One. But the question is, will America survive in the meantime? Today, we're going to look at 10 signs that the scales are starting to tip. Thank you for joining me. Welcome to Man in America. I'm your host, Seth Holhouse, broadcasting live from the heart of America, Columbus, Ohio. Thank you, everyone, for joining. I'm excited to be here. I hope that everyone had a wonderful weekend. Today's show is going to be a little bit different. The past couple of shows, and maybe more than a couple actually, have been a little bit heavy. We've been looking at Fauci and the gain of function and this diabolical plan that goes back to Xi Jinping to completely take over the world with the global communist state of extreme tyranny and oppression. And the list goes on. So today, what we're going to do is we're just going to focus on some of the good things that are happening. Because if you look between the MSM, mainstream media headlines, you'll see that there's actually there's a lot of really good things happening, a lot of very positive things happening. And fundamentally, you can see that this illusion, this leftist illusion, and I hate even saying left as in left versus right. It's a radical, the radical left, this story they've been painting for us, this lie they've been pitching is starting to crumble. And we're going to look at some of the indicators of that. And hopefully, even more so than normal, we all finish today's show feeling optimistic, hopeful, encouraged, and just ready to keep going. So as usual, I would love to see where everyone's coming from. I see my regulars here. Lisa M., good to see you. TJ Daniel, nice to see you. We've got Rudy from Los Angeles. Belly of the Beast, I know. Judith, hello from Montana. Right on time. Yep, right on time. Julie, hello from Ohio, fellow Ohioan. Mentor's Legacy. Gosh, thank you for joining from Iran. Gosh, thank you so much for joining from Iran. It's good to see you. Flash Core from Michigan. Kot from the Netherlands. Fantastic. Anna from the High Desert. We got Texas, Montana, Tennessee, Portland, Oregon. I'm sorry to hear that, Liam. I hope you're doing well out there. Howard, Virginia, Florida, Utah, Texas, everyone. It's so good to see everybody. It just makes me so happy to come on here. And I think that if I look at why does this make me feel happy? Well, one, I guess I'm a pretty happy guy, even amidst the trying times that we're in. I try to keep a positive attitude. But what it feels like to me is that this is a time where we come together and all of us we're looking to understand what's happening in the world, what's happening in America. We're looking for solution. We're looking for just how to move forward, right? And this is us coming together doing that. And that's why I love these hours I spend with you, because it just feels like that we're all escaping this illusion. I think it's more of a mind trap that they keep everyone. It's the allegory of the cave, that everyone's convinced that the shadows on the wall are real. And I feel like that for a lot of us here, we're looking out and we're seeing, it's like, wait, there's a beautiful sky that we can go to. That's the truth. That's the reality. And that's what's happening. And that's a lot of what today's show is looking at, what's really happening, because it's not easy to really see behind the veil of illusion that's over this country and over the world, because the powers that be have had control over the media and the corporations and the educational system and basically everything for a very long time. But especially starting in 2016, when this unknown guy, as a politician, as that is, who had no track record in politics, President Trump, stepped into office, completely upset their entire plan of 8 years Obama, 8 years Hillary. That wraps it up. The global control is now theirs. So, MAGA 2020, happy birthday. I'm so glad to see you. I missed you the past couple of shows. So good to see you here. Thank you for coming. One thing, just before I jump in, I will give the kind of beginning reminder that if you hit the like button, help share, make sure you're subscribed. All these things really help this content to reach more people. Unfortunately, as I've mentioned a million times, I'll keep saying it. YouTube is run by people I think that are completely in bed with the Chinese Communist Party. To put it bluntly, they don't like folks like me, and they do what they can to keep me from reaching more people because that's their biggest fear. That's their biggest worry. It's more people waking up. It's that great awakening that you may have heard about. That's the biggest fear, and that's what I'm doing, and that's what you're doing. I'm sure that you're watching this, you're sharing it with your friends, you're talking about these things, you're helping to expose this agenda, and that's what we all are here to do. On a just another quick note, the chat is a super chat, so if you do want to support, you can always give a donation on there. That's not why I'm doing this. I'm doing this because I feel like it's, I guess, because I feel like that this is a mission that God has given me, and that's fundamentally why I'm doing this. So, but those things always help to support. So, all right, let's go ahead and jump into today's show. So I'm kind of stepping down from, there's 10 stories I'm going to share with you. And we're starting off with the ones that are, I guess not least important, but towards the end, the ones where I think are the more significant. So the first story I'm going to jump into, I'm sure you've heard about Mrs. Liz Cheney. And so this is something I just wanted to share that I think is important. Now this was a poll that was recently run that shows that 8 in 10 Republicans support ousting Cheney from GOP leadership. This is on the National Pulse, which I look at quite a lot. Also, a quick reminder, I am on Rumble now. So if everything works correctly, they should be broadcasting live on Rumble. Now, one quick thing about Rumble is that YouTube, after the live video finishes, it automatically jumps back to, it takes the video and makes it a proper video on YouTube. On Rumble, after it finishes, the video disappears and I have to re-upload it, which doesn't always happen immediately. So if you're on Rumble and you notice the video is not up there correctly, that's why. YouTube always has it. It's just a difference in where they're at with their technology. So back to Mrs. Cheney, one of our favorite families here in America, the Cheneys. No corruption at all. So basically, this is why this is encouraging to me, is that this is just showing that people are seeing through these things. She's becoming a darling of the leftist media. She's going to them and complaining and whining about the treatment and, bashing Trump and all this. But if you look at, this, it shows people see through these things. Now, this is a CBS News poll, which I don't trust the polls at all. I trust the polls about as much as I trust Biden's memory. The polls are one of the major ways that they control public opinion. They control public thought, right? Because they're really playing on the whole idea that if, people are more sheep-like in their behavior, and that people will like to think what the others are thinking. They want to be a part of the cultural norm of thought. So this is the polls are one of the ways that deceptively the media, the think tanks, the politicians use these polls to really steer public opinion, because it's like if you recall, ahead of the 2016 election, all the polls were saying, Hillary's got it, Hillary's got it, Hillary's got it. Because for people that are undecided, that are sitting in the middle, they're going to think, well, if most people are going in for Hillary and they're pro-Hillary, and I'm in the middle, I'd like to, I'd rather stick with the crowd. Now, see, I'm a little bit of the opposite. I'm the kind of person that if I see the crowd going this way, I'm running the opposite direction. I don't trust the crowd. I oftentimes think that the crowd is oftentimes being led by people that know how to lead crowds very, very well, and that the people that are leading the crowds are oftentimes ill-intentioned, to say the least. So going back to Miss Liz Cheney, this poll just shows that there's just overwhelming just disgust for her within the Republican Party. And I think that it's actually much more than what you're seeing here in this poll. They're saying it's 8 out of 10. I'm thinking it's probably closer to 10 out of 10. I think the American people see through this stuff. I think they really do. So you have those numbers. Now, one thing that's interesting for me is that only 57%, according to what it says here, that only 57% believe that she's wrong about the 2020 election. I, in fact, think it's much more than that. Personally, most Republicans that I know, that I meet, that I've talked to, they know that, if it, what is the saying? If it walks like a dog, barks like a dog, and looks like a dog, it's a dog. It's like they know all the different things. They can see it, they can sense it, and we're going to talk about this in a little bit, especially if you look at what's happening in Arizona and everyone else. I think people are starting to see through. Um, it's like if there's a dam that is the state that's deep. I can't say it any other way because I get flagged if I say certain words like that. But the elite, the powers that be, it's almost like they have this dam that they've been trying to use to hold back information. And it's the information. What is this information they don't want us to know? Well, gosh, I mean, how much time do you have to listen? But a lot of the more key things that they're really trying to hold back is the truth about what happened on November 3rd. That's probably one of the number one things. The truth about what happens when people are getting that thing put in their arm lately, I can't talk about. They've been really censoring that information. The truth about the origin of the virus, which we're going to talk about a little bit later today. We've covered that a lot lately. So they've been trying so hard to keep everyone from finding that truth. But what's happening is that there's all these cracks that are showing up. There's all these people. It's the media. It's the media like the Epoch Times, the National Pulse, Gateway Pundit. It's YouTubers that are out there, people that are exposing this, and the people are waking up. And that dam that's holding that information back, it's cracking, and it's really gonna. I think that we're seeing some major cracks in it, and that's really the theme of this show is just the cracks in their dam. So that's number 10 we're looking at is Mrs. Liz Cheney. The next one I want to bring up that I think is a really positive step is this article right here, again, at the Epoch Times. All right, so how Texas, Indiana, Oklahoma to end federal unemployment benefits in June. So Abbott, so Texas, Indiana, Oklahoma on Monday announced that they'll be joining a growing number of GOP-led states in ending the expanded federal unemployment benefits that were implemented during last year's pandemic relief efforts. So this is, again, showing a movement that's happening. And what is this, right? Let's kind of dig into I'm not going to dig into the article because I like to talk about my own thoughts about this, but what you have happening here, right? If you look at, let's take a step back in history. There is if you have time to watch it, I highly recommend it. It's banned off of YouTube now. There's a brilliant man named Stefan Molyneux, and he produced one of the shows that he produced. He's almost like a professor. It was a 3-hour show called, I think it was called The Fall of Rome. So if you can Google that, you can find it, but it's a 3-hour look at why Rome fell, right? One of the most powerful nations that's ever, graced the earth, really. And it's interesting because what he does is he analyzes all the different key components of what caused it to fall. Now, I'll share some of these things with you that I picked up from watching this. I've watched it a few different times, and just ask yourself if this seems familiar to you, right? For one, they turned Rome into a welfare state, right? So they realized, the politicians in Rome realized that that they could, through welfare, they could basically buy votes, right? And again, the guy's name is Stefan Molyneux. So if you just search, thank you, Kat, K-A-T, in the link, that's his name, and it's just search for the fall of Rome. So they realized that they could by turning Rome into a welfare state, they could basically buy votes through that, by getting people hooked on the drug of welfare from the government. They also, in Rome, they opened borders. They at first had very strong borders, but they started letting more and more immigrants come in. And they actually used the welfare state as one of the biggest prizes, or one of the biggest tools to lure people in, to lure these immigrants into Rome, because they got more votes that way. They also had massive inflation. They pulled their currency off of being backed by gold, so their inflation just completely skyrocketed, which perhaps we're seeing that happen now. And the list goes on. I mean, if you look at why Rome fell, it's almost like the people that are trying to control America studied exactly what caused it to fall. And they said, hey, let's do this again right now. Let's do this again right now in America. And that became their blueprint. So now, why this I think is very interesting, as I was talking about with what's happening in Texas, Indiana, Oklahoma, these other GOP-led states, in ending the federal funding for the federal relief for unemployment, is what I believe is that as you've seen in my previous shows, I think that the entire COVID thing has been a tool that they've used that ties back to China, of course, as I've mentioned. But let's just look at it in America. I believe that's something they've been using to collapse small businesses and to get more and more people dependent on the government drug of welfare. And so, and there's a lot of different reports about people saying that, like, that they will make more money from the federal unemployment benefits than actually getting a job. And there's been a lot of people that are small business owners, restaurants, et cetera, that are trying to hire staff. They might have 10 people come in for interviews that they offer jobs to, only 2 take the jobs because the other people are interviewing just to say that they've interviewed so they can maintain their federal unemployment benefits. So people are actually having a hard time hiring. So this is a very, very slippery slope, because what happens when the government is going to pay you more to not work than they will to have you than you can make while working, right? And this is what turns our country into a welfare state, which ultimately what happens is it collapses the entire government. It creates an economic collapse. The government becomes so big, so so massive in its spending and its handouts and everything, that they can only tax the wealthy so much that it collapses. And the only thing that can really move into place after that is a complete communist state, where they now say you've got universal basic income and you have to work this much. At first, it might start off as you work 10 hours a week and we'll give you this, but then eventually it ends up as a North Korea, right? So you can see that what's leading them there. So back to the article, why to me this is positive is because you've got these governors that are saying, no, we've got, like in Texas, Abbott had said that they have just almost exactly as many open jobs in their country as they do that are people on the federal unemployment benefits. So he's saying, look, we're canceling that. Like, get off your butts, go get a job, work hard like the rest of us, and earn an income and stop leeching off the government. So again, it's a positive sign for me. And I think actually in Ohio, DeWine, though he's, I believe, to be definitely a rhino, he also is passing something similar to, I think that the federal unemployment benefits are supposed to end around September. And so we have these governors that are they're stopping it prematurely, which is fantastic. So let's look at the next article, which is this next thing. This is big news. And this is something that gets me very excited. You may not know that, but I'm a huge fan of the Second Amendment. I lived in New York City for almost the past 15 years, moved back to Ohio, where my family is from, to raise a child and escape the insanity of New York. And one of the first things I did when I got back here was go to the local gun shop, because I think that the Second Amendment is so important. I think it's that our ability to protect ourselves and to arm ourselves fundamentally to protect our nation from tyranny is so critical. And so anytime that I see things and see indications that there is support being shown for the Second Amendment, I think is incredible. So this is what happened recently. This article is of the Epoch Times. This is from May 17th. And this is incredible because the Supreme Court, which is really, it's both Democrat and Republican justices sitting, how they unanimously rebuffed Biden administration on warrantless searches for handguns. So what happened here, and this took place, I forget which state this was in. I guess it doesn't really matter as much for the discussion. So what happened with this is that there was a man that has no history, no criminal record, anything. And he got in an argument with his wife, and he was a gun owner, and he handed her or he kind of presented to her an unloaded handgun and said, okay, just go ahead and shoot me now, right? Which, I mean, look, if you've gotten into arguments, I haven't gotten into arguments where I'm doing that and giving people guns and asking to be shot, but you can see how maybe if there's a heated argument and it's something that's kind of gets to that point where that discussion might arise. So the wife, basically what happened was that the wife contacted local authorities, said that she's worried about her husband being suicidal, and they convinced him to go check into a local hospital for maybe a mental health check. But they told him, they promised they would not touch his guns while he was out. So what happened is that while he was at the hospital, the local police went in and they confiscated his handguns. And then after he left the hospital, he requested them back, but the police did not refuse to give him back his handgun. So he sued them. There's a lawsuit. And so it went up to the Supreme Court, where the Supreme Court ruled on it and saying that they are not allowed to do that. And so, as you probably know, with the law, is that the law is really built around precedents, right? And so this becomes a precedent in saying that they crossed the line with a warrantless search and seizure of handguns. And this becomes a big deal because if you look at what they call the red flag laws, I think the red flag laws is what they refer to them as. Basically, what the red flag is saying that it's a way that they're trying to infringe upon the Second Amendment by basically saying that if someone's posing a risk to themselves or others, that it gives a local police or any other agents the authority under these red flag laws to, without a warrant, go in and search and basically take back, seize weapons from people without a warrant, which is a complete violation of the Second Amendment. Now, if you look at what's happening right now with Pelosi pushing for a commission, a 9/11 style commission on what happened January 6th, which is completely absurd. But if there was these red flag laws that were passed, say nationally, what would happen if they then said that, well, these people are domestic terrorists, and they say, well, domestic terrorists can't have weapons, right? So you can see how what this could do is this could create a situation where they're creating these loopholes in the laws to basically seize guns from individuals, because they might say, well, you posted about Stop the Steal on the internet, or you went to a Trump rally, so you're now categorized as a domestic terrorist, and so you can't own weapons. So that's again, this is something that concerns me. But when we have these examples like this of the Supreme Court coming in and saying, look, this is unconstitutional, that gives me hope. As much as I lost all respect for the Supreme Court, Kavanaugh, Gorsuch, Barrett, with what happened following the election last year, at least we're seeing that there is some positive aspect of what the Supreme Court's doing. And there's one other news segment that I think is also encouraging that I'll talk about here. So that's that. Let's jump into the next story, which again, I love these stories. So what this one is that this is the Post Millennial, great website, very good articles. Get woke, go broke. So Disney revenue plummets after woke corporate culture revealed. Okay, so this is an interesting article. I mean, obviously, there's not too much to kind of dig into with it that you can kind of make sense of it. But basically, what they're saying here is that the Walt Disney Company revealed that revenues are down more than $636 million in the second quarter of 2021 as compared to the first. So they're saying that, it was only a few months ago that Disney canceled one of its star actresses because they didn't like the comments she had made on social media. I believe that, she had also, this was Gina, I forget her last name, but one of the things that she had done was that she had put in her bio, you know how people, they put like they, them, their, I guess the different pronouns perhaps, but I think she put beep, bop, boop, which I thought was kind of funny, but I guess people were offended as happens. And then there's a few other things that led to them canceling her. And so anyway, basically what's happening though is that they saw a major drop in their revenue this year. And they're also saying that, you know, in the article, they're talking about, you know, the parks, the parks, not, being open, et cetera, which of course is going to hurt them. I'm sure that the parks are a big part of the revenue, but I'm sure that their revenue, if you look at the grand scheme of what Disney is, people that go to the park to sit on Mickey's lap to get their picture taken is probably a pretty small part of their revenue. I didn't look at this beforehand, but if you look at their movie production, the whole Star Wars franchise, which they bought from Lucasfilm, from George Lucas, all of these things. So the fact that their revenue is plummeting like this is, again, the same thing as Coca-Cola. This is a case of the American people, and actually really patriots all over the world, that are saying, I'm not going to stand up for that, right? In the past, we've covered, there was a website called Second Vote. It was 2ND Vote, which is a website that shows you, it basically ranks all these major companies with realistically where they fall on the political spectrum. Are they more conservative supporting countries, or are they very liberal leaning countries or companies? So Disney would probably fall on the very, very bottom of the scale. And the idea with the Second Vote is that, we vote with our dollar. We vote in person with our ballot, but we also vote with our dollar. And so they're really saying, look, if you want to support the right companies, you got to figure out who they are and support them, right? So again, back to what's happening with Disney, it's just another example. You're seeing the same thing happening with the sports leagues, NFL, NBA, MLB, that as they take these radical steps to work hand in hand with the government, really in a kind of what you might call fascism, right? When the private sector works together with the government to push an ideological agenda, which is what I see unfolding here, that people are voting against them. They're voting with their dollars. They're refusing to support them. So, Disney, my daughter is 7, almost 8 months old now. She's not going to touch anything Disney. As much as I grew up on it as a young kid, it's just not something she's going to be exposed to, because I don't want her. I'm not going to do anything to support companies like that. I'm going to support the companies that stand up for the Constitution and everything that matters. So again, good story. Now, this next story, this is a fun one. That, again, more signs of positive things happening. So this is interesting. The power couple that it seemed like almost had full immunity to get away with anything they wanted to. And even though this wasn't something that's happening under Trump. This is happening under Biden. So Hillary and Bill hit with bad news as judge orders IRS to reveal if it investigated their foundation. So I'll read this a little bit. So what it says is that a U.S. tax court judge has ordered the IRS to disclose if it criminally investigated the Clinton Foundation. Interesting. The ruling was part of an ongoing case involving whistleblowers who have long alleged wrongdoing on the part of the charity that bears the name of former President Bill Clinton and his wife, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, right? The Clinton Foundation. So the judge, David Gustafson, there we go, pointed to a gap in IRS records and said that the agency's claim to have never criminally investigated the Clintons' charity was not supported by the administrative record, and thus constituted an abuse of discretion. Right? Now, I am not going to pretend to know what's really behind this. And a lot of this stuff is very closed, it's very sealed. But what you have happening basically is you have this judge that's asking the IRS, right? So as I understand it, that they're saying that if the IRS did investigate the Clintons And if they did not disclose that, right, I'm not sure who that to disclose it to, maybe other federal agencies, I'm not sure, that they're now saying that um, if that was not supported by the administrative record and thus constituted an abuse of discretion. So this is interesting because as far as my research has shown me, the Clinton Foundation has become, to call it a global slush fund or money laundering operation. I mean, if you look at the amount of money moving through that charity, I guess you would call it, that foundation, it's incredible, right? So it's interesting though, because they've really, Bill and Hillary have really moved into the background. They're not really as much in the spotlight. I think Hillary tweeted something about the masks yesterday. Who cares? No one cares about Hillary Clinton anymore. But the fact that they're now doing this, they're actually asking, because I think what it was is they looked at the IRS records and there was a gap, right, as it related to the Clinton Foundation. So this judge is basically saying, look, I think maybe he suspects that there was an investigation there. There's an investigation there, and into the criminality of that, the IRS, investigating, and he's saying, look, I want to see what really happened there. And if you didn't disclose that, and maybe this could be something that is, maybe it frames the IRS as being guilty, because if they investigated something like that and didn't disclose it, what could that mean? This could be interesting. So again, I don't have a whole lot of hope in these things necessarily, because I think that even under Trump with the Durham report and all the things that we saw happening that was coming out, the laptop stuff, nothing ended up being done. But it's interesting the timing of this that's happening. You have the Clintons, you have Bill Gates getting divorced, which is very suspicious. You have all these different things that are happening at once. So interesting. So on to the next story. Again, more positive. I love it. So this is really interesting. So a Space Force commander was fired, basically, right? He was relieved after speaking out against Black Lives Matter and Marxism. So he wrote a book. This happened all over the past couple of days. This all came to fruition over this past weekend. So a commander in the United States Space Force, which was created under Trump, that was relieved of duty after voicing concerns over Marxist critical race theory teachings in the military, is now number 3 on the Amazon bestseller list. And I think that he's actually number 1 now, like 4 books, which is incredible. So let's look at this. Okay. So this is Lieutenant Colonel Matthew Lomier, after going on a podcast to promote his book, Irresistible Revolution, Marxism Goal of Conquest and the Unmaking of the American Military, was removed from his post. The book, which was self-published last week, looks into the impact of a neo-Marxist agenda and how the BLM movement, anti-racism, postmodernism, and political correctness affects the national security of the U.S., according to the book's description. Now, something that's interesting, and I saw this Josh Phillip over at the Epoch Times in his live show for American Crossroads were talking about this. He made a very good point. When they were giving the excuse for why they relieved him, they said that it had something to do with commenting on partisan issues, right? Which is interesting because if disavowing and basically saying, look, Marxism and critical race theory are terrible, they're evil. If saying Marxism is evil in the military is saying that that's now a partisan issue, is one of the political parties that closely tied to Marxism that if you speak out against Marxism, that it is something that's political? I don't know. That's interesting. Like, it makes you really wonder. And if the military stands behind this, like, of all government agencies and organizations, right, if the military comes out and says that speaking out against Marxism is not allowed because it's a political thing, and what's that telling us about our army? What's that telling us about those who are in control, especially as we've seen under Biden? If you recall, after the Biden moved in all the troops to surround Washington, D.C., and he went through the whole process of They're going to start looking to search for extremism within the military, basically trying to oust those who are loyal to Trump. Well, there goes probably 80% of the military, if not more. So this is interesting. But what's incredible about this story in particular, though, is that his book is now, I think actually I saw this morning it's number one, but I'll speak from this particular article. His book is now in the top 3 books on Amazon. But what's more incredible is let's take a look at what are the top 3 books on Amazon. Okay. Number 1, Dr. Seuss, a Dr. Seuss book. Number 2 is American Marxism by Mark Levin. Okay. And number 3 is this general's book on the Marxist infiltration in the military. So again, what does this tell you about the truth, right? What's this tell you about the truth of how the general public is thinking about things, right? Because you have to look at these signs. They want us to think that that the majority are these folks that have the much more, liberal views. They want, all these more liberal policies, but actually it's like the silent majority. That term has been said for a reason. It's actually, I think, the true massive majority. I won't get into what I think the actual numbers from November 3rd were and how much of a landslide it actually was. But they want us to think that we're outnumbered, right? You turn on the TV, you look at the newspaper, it feels like everything is going one way, right? But if you look at this is incredible. On Amazon, the top 3 books, even Dr. Seuss, how funny is that? It's like the one guy from my childhood they wanted to cancel, right? Because of some silly thing they found that may have been offensive about something in one of his books. Huge, kind of mess about all that, right? So the number 3 books are basically books that I would imagine are being bought by people that are more conservative, that value the Constitution, that are perhaps anti-Marxist, anti-communist. So what's that tell you about what I believe the majority of Americans, primarily, I'm sure Americans, the American market probably is one of the primary driver of these things on Amazon, but it's also a lot of people internationally. What's that tell you about the majority? That this is what we think, this is what we care about. So a lot more people than they're going to have you believe with their fraudulent polls are extremely anti-Marxist and are very concerned about where our country's headed. Okay. All right, let's jump back into our articles. All right, we've got only a couple more. All right, this one, I'm not sure if you saw this yet. This is very significant. This is, again, so the Supreme Court agrees to take on a major abortion case. Now, I'm not going to get into the details of this because I'm still understanding it better myself, and I don't want to embarrass myself with some of the legal jargon I don't know much about. But what I can tell you with this is that the Supreme Court is going to be taking on this case. I believe it has its roots in Mississippi, that could potentially cause them to look at Roe versus Wade. Right. And if you recall, this was one of the big issues when Amy Coney Barrett was in her process of taking over RGB, which she's probably I won't share my opinion about her on, on this show. But when Amy Coney Barrett was coming in, one of the big arguments and things that fueled so much anger on the left was that she was pro-life and against this, and they're against abortion, and how there was a lot of concern that between her, Kavanaugh, and the other folks, that the Roe versus Wade would be coming back up and potentially be overturned. Now, I see a few people commenting about Amy, and yes, I agree that I think that she's controlled. Again, as I mentioned before with the Supreme Court, if I want to look at where does someone fall, like if I'm trying to say gauge, are you good or bad in my mind? If I'm looking at a celebrity, a politician, someone, a judge or a justice, I look at what was your stance on November 3rd. That's about where I look at. And the people like the politicians that are still standing firm up against that, like these are my politicians, the people that are protecting and going after election integrity, the people that are supporting what's happening in Arizona. That's the deciding factor for me. So, of course, with the Supreme Court, we saw how they acted with that. And regardless of whether they're good people or not, I don't know why they did it, but in my opinion, they sold out their country. And I'm not sure why. It doesn't matter. To me, it doesn't matter. Even if someone is threatening my life, I'm not going to sell out my country for that. But I'm not in their position, so I can't necessarily say I can imagine what it would be like, but still, that's how I look at things. So anyway, so the important news here is just that the fact that the abortion issue is coming into the foreground. And I mean, if you look at, I almost did this show specifically on abortion. I was going to go into the background of abortion and look at the history of, Margaret Sanger, the eugenicist, how extremely racist she was. The amount of, if you look at, I had a chart I was going to show you that shows the death of Black lives, right? You look at the whole Black Lives Matter movement, right? And I found a chart that shows, it's like on this bar chart, you might have, violent crime, this, that, the other, and then you have abortion. Like it's that significant, right? So I was going to go into that a little more. I'd like to go into that in a later episode, look into the history of Planned Parenthood, look at a lot of their back deal, dealings that they're doing. But I decided to focus more on 10 things I think that are really incredible, especially after last week's heavier episodes. And I wanted to look at just some things that I think will give us all some inspiration going forward. So this, again, I thought was very good news. Now all right. So this is something I will admit I got if you saw the thumbnail for today's episode, it was Domino Joe. This is a cartoon. Thank you, Ben Garrison. I give you full credit for coming up with Domino Joe. So I'll give you the full screen real quick so you can see the whole thing. So this is the other part of the news. This is the other story. I've got one more story after this, which is my number one, but number two is the audits, right? And to me, this is such a fantastic cartoon. If you haven't followed Ben Garrison, I highly, highly recommend it. You can see in the thumbnail you can't really see his name, how it's cropped. It just Ben Garrison, Garrison. He does fantastic political cartoons and he's not afraid to speak. He's a patriot. And so what he's showing with this, and this to me is the great news, is because what we're seeing, and I'm not going to go into it in this episode, I'll do a more in-depth episode about it with what's happening in Arizona. But what we're seeing is that basically things are really unraveling for the big lie in Arizona. There's a lot of things that are coming out. And you can oftentimes judge these things by the reaction of the mainstream media. And you can see when they're freaking out and flipping out and doing everything they can to discredit something, to hide something, to change the narrative, to distract from the narrative, what that tells you is that there's something really significant happening there, right? And that's the thing, is that whenever there's any kind of news coming out, one thing I always ask myself is that, what am I being distracted from, right? So what this cartoon really stands for, and what this is saying, obviously you can make sense of it, is that there's now all these other states, Michigan, Wisconsin, New Hampshire, Georgia, Pennsylvania, that are starting up their own audits. They're in the beginning stages, or they've started their own audits, right? Maricopa out in Arizona is the front battleground. It's the, what do you call it? I guess I can use a war analogy, but it's the main battle that's happening. It's the front duck, okay, of what's happening. But what that's doing, though, is that's causing a domino effect of these other states. And if something comes out in Arizona that can be forensically proven, I know that they're looking for watermarks. I know that at one point there's a lot of discussion about watermarks, and are the ballots watermarked so that you can tell under the right kind of, I'm not sure, it's much more complex than UV to see if they're fake or were these ballots all printed in China. I don't know. But anyway, what's happening here, I think, could lead to a major, major, major domino effect that could potentially undo a lot of things. And I was watching something on OAN recently saying that if they if the current presidency of Biden was, kind of decided to be not legitimate through this process, every single thing that he had done since beginning in office would be undone, would be reversed. It would be deemed kind of, not sure how they would call it legally, but so we could see a lot of things change. Again, I'm not depending on this. I'm not putting all my eggs into this basket, but these are significant things happening, and there's a lot of momentum around this. So finally, I'm going to get into my last story, what I think is the best story that I'm excited about telling you today. Looks like, I'll give you full screen for you. It's revolver.news, great website. Looks like the Biden admin has just kicked Fauci to the curb. I do not like this guy. Actually, both those guys. I'm not a big fan of either of them. Maybe you got that already. So what happened to the almighty Dr. Fauci? Last week, he was on TV telling all of us life wouldn't go back to normal for at least another year or so. And this week, he's pretty much gone. So what happened? Well, a lot, actually. The biggest turn for Fauci involves three little words: gain of function, which, if you recall, if you watched my episode, especially last Thursday, it was all about gain of function, right? Which, just if you didn't watch the episode, gain of function is basically the research of how to take a virus or a pathogen, make it so that you can spread it from animal to human and make it as deadly as possible, right? So gain of function research is basically how to create bioweapons from diseases and viruses that occur in nature. Pretty straightforward. So it was this past week when the gain of function dots were publicly connected to the good doctor. There is nothing new for those of us on the right. Here in Revolver, we covered Fauci's gain of function research extensively, and the evidence against him is very damning. A couple of months ago, Fox News host Steve Hilton blew the lid off of Fauci's macabre obsession and funding of research involving the manipulation of highly contagious viruses. So it says Hilton laid the groundwork, but it was Senator Rand Paul who called out Fauci in his ghoulish research face-to-face in a Senate hearing, which I'm not sure if you saw that. I'm not going to play it because he grills Fauci on gain of function research and whether he was behind its funding, and Fauci just lied through his teeth. This says Dr. Fauci tried to weasel out of it and flat out lied to Senator Paul, but Rand wouldn't be deterred. Later, he proved Fauci was a liar in a tweet that went viral, right? So then he tweeted this saying, quote, funding, this work funded by the National Natural Science Foundation of China and the National Institute of Health, NIAID, which is overseen by Fauci. And again, if you watched my show last Thursday, we dig into this really hard and really expose how there's not really a way that you can hide this. It's very, very obvious. And so basically what they're saying here, then Tucker Carlson also had a show talking about that, right? And here it says, and things just kept getting worse for Fauci. Later, Rand Paul appeared on Fox News saying, quote, Dr. Fauci could potentially be responsible for the coronavirus pandemic, end quote. It was heavy stuff, and it had an impact because we've hardly seen or heard from Dr. Fauci since. But even more notable is that the CDC just updated their guidelines on mask wearing and essentially ended the pandemic, a pandemic that Fauci has been the proud face of for over a year now. And when the announcement hit, he was nowhere to be found, which is odd. It used to be that he was the main one that was coming in and updating and saying, hey, this is what's happening. So they've made a significant change. They've completely done a 180 on their position on masks and everything. Fauci's nowhere to be found, right? So, and different people that are discussing this are saying that, yes, that the sidelining of Fauci began yesterday. They're going to throw him under the bus and then run him back over multiple times if necessary, right? And then, also, this is incredible, but said Fauci is spiraling out of control, desperate to cling on to some semblance of power. This is a tweet from Jordan Schatchel. And Team Biden has him on a tight leash. He will have completed the transition from the man who can do no wrong to the fall guy by the end of the month. Right. So anyway, that I think that is pretty significant because, again, if you watch what I talked about on Thursday, I think that so much of what's happening right now is tied to Obama, Fauci, the CCP, Tedros, the WHO, and that this is it's all part of a very, very large plan, but which we've seen that plan can wreck a lot of our lives. We've seen it destroy small businesses, spikes in depression, suicide, drug use, domestic abuse. It's just destroyed so many countries around the world. And what we're seeing now is that their plan is it's people are seeing through it. It's being exposed. All right. So that was my number one episode, but I have a bonus or number one episode, number one article. I have a bonus article for you, which I'm very excited to share. I'm not sure if any of you read the Babylon Bee. This is a little bit tongue in cheek. I'm usually not one that likes to pick on people, but I thought this was so funny. And because this is our happy episode, right? We shall be laughing and smiling together. We're having a good time. I thought I would read this to you. Okay, so I'm going to read this to you. Okay, this is a Babylon Bee article. The Democrats wearing Binkies to wean themselves off masks. With the CDC finally relaxing some guidelines around mask wearing, Democrats are facing the dread of parting with something that has been giving them the feelings of safety and security for over a year. To help them cope with the loss, many Democrats are turning to baby pacifiers to help them wean off masks. Quote, "The Binky is a perfect bridge toward a maskless future," said one Democrat. He then quickly popped the rubber nipple back in his mouth for a few minutes before continuing. "I think it's important to be open and vulnerable about the trauma we have all experienced in the last year." He then grabbed his blanket and teddy bear and went down for a nap. Dr. Fauci has endorsed the use of Binkies for vaccinated Democrats, but he's still suggesting a mask may be worn over them at all times. In his nightly segment, Sean Hannity ridiculed Democrats for being such big babies. Quote, "We live in a nation of sissied man babies," end quote. He said before taking a quick hit from his vape pen. So anyway, obviously that's a satire article, but I've even seen, if you look at, there's people like David Hogg, the guy that was trying to compete with Mike Lindell on the pillow thing, that was actually tweeting saying that he is struggling because he does, even though he's vaccinated, he doesn't want to take his mask off because he's worried that people will think he's a conservative. It's like, God, this is a mental illness we have happening here. So anyway, I thought that was a fantastic episode to end on. That gave me a good laugh. Actually, Kate found that to me. She was cracking up when she found that, and that was it. So thanks everybody for joining me today. I hope you had as much fun as I did today. This was a blast. I will be back again next Tuesday. Again, Tuesdays and Thursdays at noon, Eastern Standard Time in Ohio here. Remember to like the video, to help share the video. Make sure you're subscribed. YouTube keeps unsubscribing people from my channel. Again, I don't think they like me. So make sure you subscribe again. And if you want to follow me, as I've said before, the best place to follow me is on Telegram. That's where I'm most active. I share much more of my personal thoughts on there. And you can find me there at t.me/maninamerica. I also believe that link is now in the description for the video. So, and also in the description for the video, you can also find the link to my Rumble channel, because as I've mentioned before, I'm now broadcasting live in Rumble, which is the non-communist video channel. TJ, Daniel, I just want to do a quick shout out and thank you very, very much for the donations. I saw your one earlier too. Anyway, just thank you everyone for coming. It just makes my week to be here with you. And actually, I'll be here now on Thursday. For some reason, I thought today was Thursday. So anyway, I'll be here again back on Thursday at noon, and then continuing on from there. I've got some exciting announcements that I'm not yet ready to make, but I've got some great things. I want to give a special shout out to Kip 2020, who has been a great troll for us. Thank you. It's always good to have at least one troll in the chats on the videos. It keeps things interesting and spicy. Kip 2020, make sure you do an extra hail to your Xi Jinping poster in your room. I appreciate your great comments that you kept things interesting for us. You kept it spicy. Also, I see Mentor's Legacy that Brighteon will run live streamability soon. That's fantastic. That's excellent. I am now trying to post my videos onto Brighteon. Big fan of Mike Adams and what he's doing. And yeah. So anyway, thank you everyone for coming. Let's keep our heads up. There's a lot of positive signs that we're winning. We're pushing forward. There's a lot of reasons to have hope. So thank you, everyone. I'll see you Thursday. Take care.